I watched the plow blade scrape across my property line at 4:17 in the morning, dumping a wall of frozen slush onto land I had measured down to the centimeter. By sunrise, my storage shed was crushed under ice that had no business being there. And when the HOA president later smiled and told me weather doesn't respect boundaries, I realized something very clearly: they didn't expect me to fight back. I'm not the kind of guy who looks for trouble. I've lived in the Ridgemont neighborhood for 8 years, paid every HOA fee on time, followed every rule in that thick covenant handbook nobody actually reads. No weird paint colors, no unapproved landscaping, no complaints. I kept my head down and my life quiet. That's how I liked it. Before I retired, I spent 19 years in the U.S. Army as a land surveyor. Boundaries were my job. Lines on a map weren't abstract concepts to me. They were precise, enforceable, measurable facts. When I bought this house, the first thing I did was verify the property survey myself. I marked the corners. I set stakes. I documented everything. Not because I was paranoid, but because habits like that don't just disappear. So when I stepped out onto my porch that freezing December morning with a thermos of black coffee and saw a gray-brown mound of road slush sitting 3 meters inside my fence line, I didn't panic. I didn't yell. I didn't even swear. I just stood there, breath fogging in the air, watching steam rise off ice that shouldn't have been on my land. The shed took the worst of it. A small wooden structure I'd built 5 years earlier with HOA approval permits, inspections, the whole process. The back corner had collapsed under the weight. The frame twisted. Tools buried under compacted ice mixed with salt and chemicals the HOA used on their roads. Not snow, waste. I walked down the steps, slowly stopping exactly at the property line. I didn't cross it. I didn't need to. The red-topped boundary stakes were still there exactly where I'd placed them. GPS accurate. Undeniable. The tire tracks from the plow cut straight over them like they didn't exist. That's when I pulled out my phone. I took wide shots first, then close-ups, tire tread patterns, crushed wood, boundary markers. I made sure the timestamps were visible. I even planted an extra red flag exactly where the tracks crossed onto my land. Then I went back inside, spread the survey plat across my desk, and compared it to the photos. 3 meters inside my line. Clear violation. I emailed the HOA office. Short, factual, attached photos. Cited covenant sections. 8.2, no dumping waste on adjacent property. 12.3, snow from common areas must stay on HOA-maintained land. I requested removal and repair within 48 hours. I CC'd the entire board. Then I called the office and left a voicemail noting that I was recording for my records. By the time the sun was fully up, neighbors were scraping ice off windshields heading to work. Mrs. Holloway from 2 houses down waved as she backed out. She'd lived here longer than anyone. We'd talked a few times. She once mentioned that things had changed since the new HOA president took over. At the time, I hadn't thought much about it. I would later wish I'd listened more closely. 3 days passed. The response I got wasn't from the board. It was from the HOA secretary, a woman named Mara, and it might as well have been copied from a template library. Snow was a natural phenomenon. The association couldn't control where it landed. I should consider filing a claim with my own insurance and try to be more cooperative as a member of the community. I read it twice. Then I opened the covenant handbook and highlighted the exact sections she'd ignored. Saved everything. Started a timeline. Dates, times, responses or lack of them. I called the office again and asked to speak to someone on the board. I was put on hold. Corporate music. When Mara came back, she told me complaints were reviewed monthly and my issue would be added to the agenda. The next meeting was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks. I asked if there was an emergency protocol for active property damage. She said no. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not anger, something colder, more deliberate. I spent the next 2 days reading every page of the covenant like it was enemy terrain. I drove to the county courthouse and pulled the HOA bylaws. Learned about fiduciary duty, contractor liability, response deadlines the board was already violating. Then I wrote a certified letter, 3 pages, chronological, documented, calm. I sent one copy to the HOA office, one directly to the HOA president Sloan Whitmore, and one to myself. That evening I met Mrs. Holloway at the coffee shop near the neighborhood entrance. When I told her what happened, she didn't look surprised. She told me stories, fines, threats, people pressured into compliance because it was easier than fighting. Sloan, she said, didn't like being challenged. She warned me to be careful. I went home knowing I wasn't going to drop it. But I'll be honest, there was a night about a week in when I sat at my kitchen table staring at the numbers I'd already spent. Certified mail, printing, time off work, stress. The shed was damaged, sure, but part of me wondered if this was really worth it. The HOA had lawyers, money, time. I was one guy. I actually thought about giving up, filing insurance, letting it go. That scared me more than the damage, because walking away would mean admitting that boundaries didn't matter, that rules only applied when convenient, that someone with a title could tell me my land was negotiable. That's when I ordered the cameras. Not cheap ones, real surveillance, 4K, night vision, GPS timestamps, cloud backups. If they were going to cross my line again, I wanted proof no one could dismiss. They arrived Christmas Eve. I installed all three myself: front boundary, driveway access, rear line, tested everything, made sure license plates would be readable in the dark. I didn't tell the HOA. 3 weeks later, the second storm hit. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. to silence the kind that only comes after heavy snow. Before I even looked outside, I checked the camera feed. The plow truck came in from the HOA maintenance road and stopped right at my property edge. The driver didn't hesitate. He lowered the blade, angled it toward my land, and pushed. Once, twice, 3 times. Each pass deliberate, methodical. He looked directly at my house before starting. I sat there watching the footage, my coffee untouched, feeling something settle in my chest. Not rage, certainty. When I went outside, the shed was gone, completely collapsed. Tools scattered, wood snapped, ice compacted so hard it wouldn't melt for weeks. I took photos, measurements. Then I called the non-emergency police line. The officer who showed up was young, tired, polite. He watched the video on my laptop without saying a word. Then he shook his head and wrote a report. Destruction of property. Civil dispute, but documented. At 8 a.m., I walked into the HOA office. Sloan Whitmore came out with 2 board members. Controlled, annoyed. She asked what the emergency was. I played the video. 90 seconds. Silence. They tried to spin it. Lighting conditions. Pressure on the contractor. Accidents happen. I told them this was the second violation. That I had police reports. That their covenant prohibited exactly this. That I'd consulted a lawyer. Sloan warned me about legal consequences. About resources I couldn't match. I told her I'd see her at the meeting. That night I decided how far I was willing to go. At the meeting I presented everything. Calm, factual, video projected on the wall, survey maps, incident reports, no yelling, no emotion. They offered insurance, no admission of fault, no guarantee it wouldn't happen again. So I told them this: if the snow wasn't removed within 72 hours, I would remove it myself, on my land, in full compliance with the law. They didn't understand what I meant. They did the next morning. I built a wall, using the snow they dumped. I measured every inch. 30 meters long, 2 meters high, exactly on my property line. Reinforced with water so it froze solid, blocking their maintenance road completely. Legal, documented, recorded. By sunrise, the neighborhood was buzzing. Photos, videos, posts, comments. The story spread faster than I expected. HOA overreach. Property rights. A man fighting back. The local news showed up that afternoon. Sloan called me that evening furious. Claimed I created a safety hazard. Threatened legal action. I told her the wall would come down when the HOA respected my boundary. She hung up. The next day, the board collapsed. Members resigned. An investigation was launched. Contracts examined. Financial irregularities uncovered. Sloan resigned within 24 hours. I received a check for the damage, a written apology. The wall eventually melted. I never celebrated. I didn't need to. I just stood on my porch one evening, coffee in hand, looking at the red boundary markers still in the ground exactly where they'd always been. And I understood something simple, something I'll never forget. Boundaries only disappear when you let people cross them.